The stone walls of Thornwood Manor had been her cage for 5 years, but tonight, they trembled with the weight of secrets about to break free. Somewhere beyond her locked tower room, the sacred mating ceremony was beginning, and her aunt was about to discover that some truths are too powerful to bury. The scent of crushed lavender and beeswax candles drifted up through the floorboards of the East Tower, mocking Alara Thornwood with every peal of laughter, every excited shriek from below. In the great hall of Thornwood Manor, unmated females from across the Northern Territory were being prepared for the sacred ceremony, bathed in milk and honey, dressed in gowns of silk and velvet, their hair woven with flowers and river pearls. Above them, locked in a room that had become her prison, Alara pressed her forehead against the cold stone wall and counted the cracks in the mortar. Anything to avoid counting the years she'd been invisible. If you're watching this from somewhere far from the Northern Territories, maybe a place where towers don't hold prisoners and families don't betray their own, leave a comment below telling me where you're from. And if this story speaks to you, if you've ever felt hidden or silenced, subscribe so you never miss a chapter. Because Alara's story is just beginning, and what happens next will shake the foundations of everything she's been told about herself. 5 years. 5 years since her parents died in that hunting accident that no one questioned, no one investigated. 5 years since Aunt Katrine had arrived at Thornwood with tears streaming down her perfectly powdered face, promising to care for her orphan niece with a mother's love. 5 years of slowly disappearing, first from pack gatherings where her presence was deemed inappropriate, then from the family dining table where her fragile nerves couldn't handle company, and finally, from anywhere beyond these 4 tower walls. It's for your own protection, darling. Katrine's voice from that morning still echoed in Alara's mind, honey-sweet and sharp as a blade. Her aunt's manicured hand had rested on her shoulder with practiced gentleness, but her fingers had dug in like talons. You know how people stare at those eyes of yours? Those strange golden eyes that make them so uncomfortable. And with your delicate constitution, the excitement of the ceremony could trigger one of your episodes. Alara's jaw clenched. She didn't have episodes. She'd never had episodes. But Katrine had spent 5 years spinning that lie to anyone who would listen, weaving a web of concerned whispers and sympathetic sighs until everyone believed the Thornwood orphan was fragile, unreliable, unfit. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark window pane, pale skin, tumbled waves of blonde hair that caught the failing light, and yes, those eyes. Golden as honey, golden as sunrise, golden as the healing magic that had once run through the Thornwood bloodline before it was systematically erased from history.
She didn't know that yet.
But she would. On the small table beside her narrow bed sat her only inheritance, her mother's leather-bound journal, confiscated by Katrine years ago and only recently discovered hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Alara hadn't dared open it yet, terrified of what truths it might contain. The worn brown leather seemed to pulse with secrets in the dimming light. The clamor from below intensified as dusk settled over the manor. Through the stone floor, Alara could feel the vibration of drums beginning their ancient rhythm, calling, summoning, demanding. The mating ceremony happened once every 5 years when the autumn moon reached its peak and the barrier between souls grew thin enough for true mates to recognize one another. For unmated females between 16 and 25, attendance wasn't optional. It was sacred law, unless you were locked in a tower. Alara pressed her palm flat against the door, as if she could absorb the energy of the celebration below through the wood. Not for her. Never for her. She'd accepted that truth long ago, buried it so deep that it barely hurt anymore. A soft knock shattered the silence. Alara? The voice was barely a whisper, urgent and familiar. Are you there? I don't have much time. Marcus. The stable master's son, one of the few people in Thornwood who still looked her in the eye. Alara's heart lurched. She fumbled with the lock. Katrine had started locking it from the outside 6 months ago, claiming Alara wandered in her sleep, but the door was somehow already unlatched. Marcus must have picked it. She yanked it open, eyes darting past him to the dark stairwell beyond. You shouldn't be here, she hissed, pulling him inside. If my aunt finds you. Your aunt is too busy parading Serena in front of every unmated male in the territory. Marcus's voice was tight with disgust, including the Alpha King. The words hit Alara like a physical blow. What? You didn't know? Marcus searched her face, and something like anger flickered in his dark eyes. Of course you didn't. She's kept you up here like a ghost. He thrust a bundle of cloth into Alara's arms. That's why I'm here. You're not missing this ceremony. Not this one. The bundle unfurled into a simple dress of deep forest green, rough spun linen, probably borrowed from one of the kitchen maids, but clean and whole, and nothing like the faded gray shift Katrine allowed her to wear. Marcus, I can't. Alara started, automatic refusal rising to her lips. Yes, you can. His voice was firm, almost fierce. Your father was an elder of this pack, Alara. You have as much right to attend as anyone. More right than Serena, who wasn't even born here. You don't understand. Alara clutched the dress, her fingers trembling. The last time I tried to go to a gathering, I was 15. They laughed. They called me. You were a child then. Marcus cut her off, his expression softening. You're 19 now. And this isn't just any ceremony. The Alpha King himself is attending, Alara. King Rowan of the 5 territories. Her breath caught. Alpha King Rowan. The name alone carried weight, a silver-haired warrior who had unified 5 warring territories through sheer force and strategic brilliance. A king with a reputation for being as cold as winter steel, who trusted no one and took no mate despite a decade of political pressure. Why would he come here? Alara whispered. He never attends regional ceremonies. Marcus leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely audible. Because, rumor has it he's dying. Cursed during the border wars. They say he's searching for something or someone who can break it. A healer. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Alara didn't fully understand. A healer. Her mother's journal seemed to burn on the table behind her. I'm not a healer, Alara said, but the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. I'm just. You're more than what your aunt has told you. Marcus pressed the dress into her hands with finality. Trust me. You need to be at the ceremony. Something shifted in Alara's chest. Not hope, she'd learned to kill that dangerous emotion years ago, but something close to it. Something that felt like the first crack in a dam that had held back a flood for far too long.
Curiosity.
Defiance. The faint, terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, Katrine had been lying about more than just the episodes. As Marcus helped her into the simple green dress, as she tucked her mother's journal into the deep pocket at her hip, Alara Thornwood made a choice. Tonight, she would step out of the shadows her aunt had forced her into.
Tonight, she would be seen.
And everything would change. The servants' passage was narrow and dark, the stone steps worn smooth by generations of invisible feet. Marcus led the way with a small lantern, its flickering light casting dancing shadows on the walls as Alara followed, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every creak of the old stairs sounded like thunder in her ears, every distant voice from below a potential discovery. Wait. Marcus stopped suddenly, pressing himself against the wall. Through a gap in the stones, they could see into one of the manor's receiving rooms. Katrine stood there in a gown of deep crimson, her dark hair piled high and adorned with jewels that had once belonged to Alara's mother. She was adjusting the neckline of a stunning blonde woman in pale pink, Serena, her daughter, who had Katrine's sharp cheekbones but a softer edge to her features that made her the toast of every gathering. Remember what I told you, Katrine was saying, her voice carrying through the gap. When the Alpha King arrives, you must be the first face he sees. Make eye contact. Smile, but not too eagerly. You're presenting yourself as his equal, not a desperate female throwing herself at him. Serena's reflection in the mirror showed uncertainty. Mother, what if he doesn't? He will. Katrine's tone sharpened. I've spent 5 years ensuring this moment. 5 years removing every obstacle, every complication that could interfere with our family's ascension to power. Her eyes grew cold. Your cousin would have complicated things. Those eyes of hers, that bloodline, people ask questions when they see her. Questions I couldn't afford to have answered until it was too late for anyone to do anything about it. Alara's blood turned to ice. Marcus's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing tight. Is she really as unstable as you've told everyone? Serena asked quietly. Katrine laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Alara? The girl is perfectly sane. Weak-willed and pathetically compliant, but sane. The episodes were a convenient fiction, one that's kept her exactly where I needed her, invisible and irrelevant. By the time anyone realizes the truth, you'll be queen, and the Thornwood healing gift will have died with her parents, as it should have decades ago. The casual cruelty in her voice made Alara's stomach turn. All these years, she'd believed something was wrong with her. All the times she'd apologized for existing, doubted her own mind, shrunk herself smaller and smaller to avoid triggering one of her supposed spells. It had all been a lie. A deliberate, calculated lie designed to keep her imprisoned. Marcus tugged her forward before she could make a sound. They descended deeper into the passage, leaving Katrine's voice behind, but the words echoed in Alara's mind like a curse being broken.
Perfectly sane.
Weak-willed and pathetically compliant. The passage opened into the manor's old wine cellar, thick with dust and the smell of earth. Marcus pulled aside a rotting tapestry to reveal a low door that led to the garden. This is as far as I can take you, he said, his young face serious in the lamplight. The ceremony grounds are beyond the rose garden, through the northern woods. Follow the torchlight. You'll hear the drums. He pressed something into her palm, a small iron key. This opens the garden gate. Once you're through, don't look back. Alara stared at the key, then at Marcus. Why are you helping me? If Katrine finds out. She's been stealing from the estate coffers for years, paying off pack members who might question her story about you. Marcus's voice was tight with anger. My father noticed the discrepancies in the household accounts. When he tried to bring it to the other elders, he had a sudden accident in the stables. Broke his legs so badly he'll never walk properly again. His jaw clenched. Your aunt is dangerous, Alara. And she's getting away with it because everyone believes you're the unstable one. The weight of it settled on Alara's shoulders, the people who had suffered because Katrine needed to maintain her lie. How many others had been silenced or discredited? How much had her aunt stolen, both in gold and in lives? I should confront her, Alara whispered. Tell the elders. With what proof? Your word against hers, when she spent 5 years convincing everyone you can't be trusted. Marcus shook his head.
No.
You need to be seen tonight. You need the Alpha King to see you, and then everything changes. Katrine's power comes from keeping you hidden. Take that away from her. He was right. Alara could feel it in her bones. Tonight was the fulcrum point. Either she stepped into the light, or she disappeared into Katrine's shadow forever. She pulled the green dress straight, tucked her mother's journal more securely into the pocket, and met Marcus's eyes. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. Your father was a good man. He deserved better than what happened to him. Marcus stepped back, lifting his lantern. Now go. And, Alara? Don't apologize to anyone tonight. Not for existing, not for your eyes, not for being exactly who you are. The garden was silver-washed in moonlight, roses blooming despite the late season, their perfume heavy on the night air. Alara moved quickly along the gravel paths, her simple dress whisking against her legs, the key clutched in one hand. In the distance, she could hear them, the drums, deep and rhythmic, calling the unmated to gather. Calling her. The gate loomed ahead, iron wrought in the shape of thorned vines. Beyond it, the forest beckoned, lit by torches that formed a pathway through the trees. Alara fitted the key into the lock, and it turned with a decisive click. 5 years of isolation. 5 years of believing she was broken. 5 years of Katrine's carefully constructed prison. Alara pushed the gate open and stepped through. Behind her, Thornwood Manor rose against the night sky, its windows blazing with light and celebration. In the east tower, a single window remained dark, the room where she was supposed to be locked away, invisible and silent. But she wasn't there anymore. The forest path stretched before her, torchlit and waiting, and somewhere ahead, an alpha king searched for something he'd lost hope of finding. Somewhere ahead, her life was about to begin again. Alara took one last look at the manor, then turned toward the drums and walked into her future. The ceremonial grounds had been carved into a natural amphitheater where the forest opened into a clearing beneath the autumn moon. Hundreds of wolves from across the northern territory filled the space, some in human form, others partially shifted, their eyes glowing amber in the firelight. At the center burned a massive bonfire, its flames reaching toward the stars, and arranged in a semicircle around it sat the territory's elders and visiting dignitaries. But it was the figure on the raised platform that drew every eye. Alpha King Rowan sat motionless as stone, a warrior carved from winter itself. Silver hair fell past his shoulders, catching the firelight like frost, and his face bore the marks of battle survived, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, another along his jaw. He wore dark armor etched with symbols Alara didn't recognize, and a cloak of black fur draped across shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of 5 territories. His presence was a physical force, the kind of power that made the air itself feel heavy. He looked exactly like the man in the image Marcus had once shown her from an old territory gazette, stern, unyielding, untouchable. Alara pressed herself against a massive oak at the clearing's edge, partially hidden by shadows and the press of spectators. She'd arrived just as the presentations were beginning, unmated females stepping forward one by one to be acknowledged by the visiting king, each hoping to catch his interest. So far, Rowan had barely looked at any of them, his gaze distant and cold, as if he were somewhere else entirely. "He's not even trying," someone whispered nearby. "They say his curse has made him incapable of feeling the mate bond." "Then why come at all?" another voice responded. "Unless he's desperate enough to try anything." Alara's fingers found her mother's journal through the fabric of her pocket, drawing courage from its solid weight. She shouldn't be here. Any moment, Katrine would notice her absence, would send someone to drag her back. "Serena of House Thornwood," the ceremony master announced, his voice carrying across the clearing. Alara's breath caught as her cousin glided forward in that stunning pink gown, all grace and practiced poise. Serena positioned herself before the platform, head bowed in the traditional gesture of respect, then lifted her face with a calculated smile. Rowan's gaze flickered toward her, polite but empty. "You honor us with your presence." The words were formal, meaningless. Even Serena seemed to sense it, her smile faltering slightly as she stepped back. Katrine watched from the elders section, her expression tight, with barely concealed frustration. More females were presented. More empty acknowledgments. The crowd was growing restless, whispers spreading that the cursed king would leave without claiming anyone, that this ceremony would mark another year of political instability across the territories. Alara should leave. Slip back through the forest before anyone noticed she'd been here at all. But her feet wouldn't move, rooted to the earth as surely as the oak beside her. Something kept her there, a pulse she couldn't name, a feeling that if she left now, she would be running from the only chance she'd ever have to be truly seen. She stepped out from behind the tree. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't announce herself or stride into the firelight. She simply moved forward into a space between spectators, no longer hiding in the shadows, but not quite part of the ceremony either. Just a girl in a simple green dress, watching from the periphery of a celebration she wasn't supposed to attend. And Alpha King Rowan's had snapped toward her like he'd been struck by lightning. The transformation was instantaneous and shocking. His entire body went rigid, every muscle tensing as if preparing for battle. His eyes, cold gray a moment before, blazed suddenly gold, his wolf surging so close to the surface that gasps rippled through the crowd. The elders half rose from their seats, hands moving to weapons, confused and alarmed by their king's reaction. But Rowan wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Alara, and the expression on his scarred face was something between wonder and devastation. "You," he said, his voice carrying despite being barely above a whisper. Then louder, commanding, "Come forward." The crowd parted like water, leaving a clear path between Alara and the platform. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Every person in the clearing was staring at her now, and the weight of their attention after 5 years of invisibility was crushing. I said, "Come forward." Rowan rose to his feet, and the movement was pure predatory grace despite his armor.
Now.
Alara's legs moved without conscious decision, carrying her forward step by trembling step. The firelight washed over her as she approached the platform, and she heard the whisper start. "Is that Edward's daughter? The one with the condition?" "Impossible. She can't be here. Your Majesty." Katrine's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade, sharp with barely controlled panic. She was pushing through the crowd, her face a mask of concerned alarm. "Please forgive this interruption. My niece is unwell. She shouldn't be here. She has episodes." Silence. The single word from Rowan carried such absolute authority that Katrine actually stumbled back a step, her mouth snapping shut. He hadn't looked away from Alara, his golden eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her skin burn. "What is your name?" "Alara." Her voice came out barely audible. "Alara Thornwood." "Alara Thornwood," he repeated, as if tasting each syllable. Then he descended from the platform in 2 powerful strides, closing the distance between them until he stood directly before her. Up close, he was overwhelming, taller than she'd realized, radiating heat and power and something else, something that made her wolf stir for the first time in years. "Look at me." She forced her gaze up, past the armor and scars, until she met his eyes. Gold meeting gold. The moment their gazes locked, the world seemed to tilt, everything except him falling away into insignificance. She felt it then, the pull, the recognition, the sense of something clicking into place that she hadn't even known was broken. "Your Majesty, please." Katrine tried again, desperation creeping into her voice. "She's mentally unstable. She can't be trusted. She is my mate." Rowan's words fell into the stunned silence, like stones into still water. He reached out slowly, giving Alara time to pull away, and cupped her face with a scarred hand that was surprisingly gentle. "By the moon and the ancient laws, I claim this female. She is mine, and I am hers." The clearing erupted into chaos, shocked exclamations, Katrine's shriek of protest, the elders demanding explanations. But Alara heard none of it, lost in the gold of Rowan's eyes, in the fierce possession in his voice, in the impossible reality that after 5 years of being told she was nothing, the most powerful alpha in 5 territories had just claimed her in front of everyone. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You will," Rowan promised, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "But first, you're going to tell me everything about who convinced you that you needed to hide those extraordinary eyes." Alara woke to softness she'd forgotten existed. The bed beneath her was a cloud of down and silk, so different from the thin mattress in her tower room that for a moment she thought she'd died in the night and woken in some afterlife. Then the events of the previous evening crashed back. The ceremony, the Alpha King's blazing gold eyes, his voice declaring her his mate before hundreds of witnesses. She sat up too quickly, the room spinning. Sunlight streamed through tall windows draped in blue velvet, illuminating guest quarters more spacious than the entire East Tower. Someone had left a tray of food on the bedside table, fresh bread, cheese, fruit that must have cost a fortune this late in the season. Her simple green dress had been cleaned and draped over a chair, and beside it hung a gown of deep burgundy that looked like it might actually fit her. "This isn't real," she whispered to the empty room. "It can't be real." A knock at the door made her flinch hard enough that she nearly fell off the bed. "Lady Alara?" A female voice, respectful. "His Majesty requests your presence when you're ready. There's no rush." Lady Alara. The title sounded wrong, like clothing meant for someone else. She dressed quickly in the burgundy gown, fingers fumbling with the laces, then caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror and froze. The girl staring back looked nothing like the ghost from the tower. The gown brought out the gold in her eyes, made her pale skin seem luminous rather than sickly. Her hair fell in waves around her shoulders, and for a moment, just a moment, she looked almost like she belonged in a room this beautiful. Then the old voice crept in, Katrine's voice. Don't fool yourself. Pretty dress or not, you're still broken underneath. The knock came again, gentler this time. Alara opened the door to find a tall woman with kind eyes and a warrior's bearing, the same woman who had escorted her here last night after Rowan's shocking declaration. I'm Lydia, my lady. His Majesty has asked me to serve as your personal guard. She smiled at Alara's obvious confusion. It means I go where you go, protect you if needed, and answer to no one but you and the king. I don't need protecting, Alara said automatically, then winced at how small her voice sounded. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be ungrateful. It's very kind, You're apologizing for expressing a preference? Lydia's expression shifted to something harder. How long has someone been training that response into you? The question hit like a physical blow. Alara's mouth opened, then closed. 5 years. 5 years of learning that having opinions led to lectures about her episodes, that disagreeing meant being told she was confused, that existing too loudly resulted in another lock being added to her door. Come, Lydia said gently. The king is waiting, and he's not known for his patience. Though interestingly, he's been pacing outside this door for the past hour, waiting for you to wake naturally rather than having you disturbed. Rowan was in a private sitting room, and he looked different in daylight, less the intimidating warrior king and more simply a man, though no less imposing. He wore dark leather and linen instead of armor, his silver hair pulled back, and he was standing at the window with the tense stillness of someone fighting internal battles. He turned when she entered, and his expression did something complicated when he saw her. You're awake. He said it like a relief, then seemed to catch himself. How did you sleep? Alara's hands twisted in her skirt. Thank you for the room.
And the dress.
I'm sorry if I've caused trouble. If this is all too complicated, I understand if you need to. Stop. Rowan crossed the room in 3 strides, his scarred face intense. Stop apologizing. Stop making yourself smaller. Who taught you to do that? The directness of it caught her off guard. I don't. Yes, you do. His voice was firm but not harsh. You've apologized 3 times in as many minutes for existing in space, having needs, potentially causing inconvenience. That's not natural behavior, Alara. That's learned. So I'll ask again. Who taught you to make yourself so small? The truth tried to claw its way up her throat, but years of conditioning held it back. Katrine's voice in her head. Don't make trouble. Don't draw attention. No one will believe you anyway. Rowan seemed to read something in her silence. He pulled over 2 chairs, positioning them close but not threateningly so, and sat in one.
Please, sit with me.
She did, perching on the edge like she might need to flee at any moment. Last night, your aunt called you unstable, Rowan said quietly. Claimed you have episodes that you can't be trusted. But I watched you carefully. I've seen true mental instability, warriors broken by battle, nobles driven mad by power. You don't have those signs. What you have are the markers of someone who's been systematically told they can't trust their own mind. His gray-gold eyes held hers. Am I wrong? The words unlocked something in Alara's chest. She started after my parents died, she heard herself say. The hunting accident 5 years ago. My Aunt Katrine came to take care of me, but it wasn't, she didn't. The sentence is fragmented, too much trying to come out at once. Take your time, Rowan said. I'm not going anywhere. So Alara told him about the gradual isolation, the invented episodes, the gaslighting that made her doubt her own memories and perceptions. About being locked in the tower while her aunt drained the family estate, about Marcus's father being hurt for noticing the financial discrepancies. About 5 years of slowly disappearing while everyone watched and did nothing because they believed Katrine's lies. Rowan's expression grew darker with each revelation, a cold fury building behind his eyes. When she finished, her voice hoarse from talking more than she had in months, he was silent for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and cupped her face with both hands the way he had at the ceremony. His scarred palms were warm against her skin. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice low and intense. "What was done to you was abuse. Calculated, deliberate abuse. Your aunt isolated you, controlled your resources, manipulated others' perceptions of you, and convinced you that you were the problem. None of that was your fault. None of it was because you were actually broken." Tears burned behind Alara's eyes. But everyone believed her. Even I started to believe. Because that's what gaslighting does. It's designed to make you doubt reality. His thumbs brushed away the tears that escaped. "But you're not in that tower anymore, Alara. And as of this moment, Katrine of House Thornwood no longer has any legal authority over you. I'm formally declaring you under royal protection and releasing you from her guardianship." "She won't like that," Alara whispered. Something dangerous flickered across Rowan's face. "I don't particularly care what she likes. She spent 5 years tormenting my mate. When I'm finished investigating her crimes, she'll be lucky if all she loses is her position." He released Alara's face but caught her hands instead. "You will never apologize to me for existing. You will never make yourself small in my presence. And we will learn together, how to trust your own mind again. Understood?" Alara nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good." Rowan stood, pulling her gently to her feet. "Now come. There are people I want you to meet, and a life waiting for you beyond that tower. It's time you started living it." The royal caravan left Thornwood territory at dawn, a procession of carriages and mounted guards that made Alara feel both protected and exposed. She rode in Rowan's personal coach, an elaborate thing of dark wood and velvet cushions that swayed gently as they traveled. Lydia sat across from her, a quiet presence working on some embroidery, while Rowan had chosen to ride horseback for the first part of the journey. "He does that when the pain gets bad," Lydia said quietly, noticing Alara's gaze following the king's silver-haired figure through the window. "Thinks physical exertion helps distract from it." "The curse Marcus mentioned," Alara said. "Is it true?" Lydia's expression grew somber. 5 years ago, during the final battle of the Border Wars, a dying sorcerer marked him. Dark magic that eats at him slowly, some days worse than others. Every healer in the 5 territories has tried to break it. None have succeeded.
She paused.
"That's why he came to your territory ceremony. Desperation makes us try things we'd normally dismiss." "But I'm not a healer," Alara protested. "I don't know anything about." "Your aunt worked very hard to make sure of that, didn't she?" Lydia's needle paused mid-stitch. "Makes me wonder what she was afraid you might discover about yourself." The words settled into Alara's mind like seeds, uncomfortable and impossible to ignore. By afternoon, Rowan joined them in the carriage, and Alara could immediately see what Lydia meant. His jaw was tight with suppressed pain, a muscle jumping in his cheek, and his breathing was carefully controlled. He sat across from her, closing his eyes, and she could see the curse now, dark veins spreading from beneath his collar, visible against his neck like cracks in marble. "You don't have to pretend it doesn't hurt," she said softly. His eyes opened, surprised. "I'm not." He stopped, reading something in her expression. 5 years of practice at pretending. Hard to break the habit. "I know something about that." Alara leaned forward slightly. "The pretending to be fine when everything is breaking apart inside. The smile that says nothing's wrong while you're drowning." Something shifted in Rowan's face, a recognition of shared understanding. "The curse gets worse with stress. Coming to your territory, the ceremony, it activated something. I've been fighting it since yesterday." As if summoned by the admission, his body went rigid. The dark veins spread visibly, creeping up his neck toward his jaw, and his hands clenched into fists. A sound escaped him that he tried to swallow, but Alara heard it. Pain, raw and animal. She moved without thinking, crossing to sit beside him. "What can I do?" "Nothing." The word came through gritted teeth. "No one can. I just have to." He broke off, his breathing ragged. Alara's hand hovered over his clenched fist, hesitating. 5 years of being told not to touch, not to reach out, not to impose herself on others. But this wasn't about her conditioning. This was about someone in agony right in front of her. She placed her hand over his. The effect was immediate and shocking. Warmth bloomed in her palm, spreading up her arm. Not uncomfortable, but intense, like sunlight concentrated through glass. Her hand began to glow, soft golden light seeping from her skin where it touched his. The dark veins in Rowan's neck retreated slightly, and his breathing eased. What? Elara tried to pull back, terrified, but Rowan's other hand covered hers, keeping it in place. Don't stop. His voice was hoarse. Whatever you're doing, don't stop. The golden light intensified, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. She could feel something flowing between them, not just warmth, but something deeper, more fundamental. She could sense the curse now, a cold, oily presence wrapped around his life force like poisonous vines. Her light pushed against it, and the darkness retreated. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the glow faded. Elara sagged back against the cushions, suddenly exhausted. Rowan was staring at his hand where she'd touched him, then at her, his expression caught between wonder and disbelief. The pain, he said slowly. It's gone. Not just dulled, gone. Lydia had dropped her embroidery entirely, staring at them both with wide eyes. That's not possible. Every healer we've consulted said the curse was too deeply rooted to. I'm not a healer, Elara interrupted, her voice shaking. I don't know how to do whatever that was. I've never. Haven't you? Rowan caught her chin gently, forcing her to meet his gaze.
Think, Elara.
Have there been other times? Small things you dismissed or were told to ignore. Animals drawn to you? Plants thriving under your care? Knowing when someone was hurt before they told you. The memories came flooding back. The injured fox that had sought her out in the woods, how it had healed impossibly fast after she'd held it. The winter roses in the tower that bloomed out of season whenever she touched them. The way she'd always known when Marcus's father was having a bad day with his injury, even from rooms away. My aunt always said I was imagining things, she whispered. That it was part of my condition, seeing patterns that weren't there. Or she knew exactly what you were and made sure you never learned to use it. Rowan's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Elara, I think you're a Thornwood healer. The bloodline everyone thought died out generations ago. But why would she hide that? Even as Elara asked, pieces were clicking into place. Unless she feared what you could become, Rowan finished. A healer bonded to a king would have immense power and influence. Your aunt wanted that power for her own daughter. She couldn't risk you discovering your gift and threatening her plans. The manipulation went even deeper than Elara had realized. Katrine hadn't just stolen her inheritance and her freedom. She'd stolen her very identity, her purpose, the thing that made her fundamentally herself. I don't know how to control it, Elara said, looking at her hands like they belonged to someone else. What if I hurt someone? What if? Then we'll learn together. Rowan's hand found hers again, and this time the touch was gentle, not desperate. I have resources, ancient texts, advisors who might remember the old ways. We'll figure it out. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why would you do all that for someone you just met? Rowan's scarred face softened into something that might have been a smile. Because you're my mate. Because you gave me the first relief from pain I've had in 5 years without even knowing what you were doing. Because I think you've been told for so long what you can't do that someone needs to show you everything you can. He squeezed her hand. And because underneath all that conditioning your aunt forced on you, I see someone extraordinary trying to break free. I want to help her do that. Elara felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't from pain or fear. They were from something else, something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. The curse isn't fully gone, she said, sensing the darkness still coiled around his life force, diminished but not destroyed. It's too deep. I only pushed it back. Which is more than anyone else has managed. Rowan's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. We have 3 days to the capital. Perhaps by then, you'll have pushed it back even further. Outside the carriage windows, the landscape rolled past, leaving behind the territory where Alara had been imprisoned and heading towards something new. Something terrifying and thrilling and completely unknown. She looked at their joined hands, at the faint golden shimmer still visible beneath her skin, and made a choice. She would learn what she was. She would reclaim everything Katrine had taken from her. And she would never apologize for her light again. The capital city of Blackthorn rose from the valley like something from Alara's childhood storybooks, spires of pale stone reaching toward the sky, banners snapping in the wind, and at its heart, the palace itself. A fortress and sanctuary combined, its walls had stood for 300 years, weathering wars and political upheavals with equal stoicism. Alara's arrival caused immediate commotion. Servants whispered behind their hands. Nobles appeared in doorways to catch glimpses of the unknown female their king had claimed, and somewhere in the depths of the palace, Alara could feel the weight of centuries pressing down. This place held secrets, old knowledge, and the truth about what she was. Lady Meredith arrived at Alara's new chambers within an hour of her settling in. She was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp as broken glass and twice as knowing. She carried a leather-bound tome that looked older than the palace itself. "So," she said without preamble, studying Alara with unnerving intensity. "You're the one who made the king's curse retreat. The girl with golden eyes who appeared from nowhere." "I didn't appear from nowhere," Alara said, then caught herself starting to apologize and stopped. "I've lived in Thornwood territory my whole life." "Hidden in Thornwood territory," Lady Meredith corrected, setting her tome on the table with a decisive thump. "There's a difference. Tell me, child, what do you know about your mother's family?" "Very little. She died when I was 6. My father never spoke much about her lineage. Perhaps because he was protecting you. Or perhaps because he didn't fully understand what he'd married into." Lady Meredith opened the tome, pages crackling with age, and turned it toward Alara. The illustration showed a woman with golden eyes and light radiating from her hands. The Thornwood Healers. An ancient bloodline, older than the 5 territories themselves. They could heal not just wounds of the flesh, but corruption of the spirit, the darkness that seeps into warriors who see too much violence, that turns them into monsters. Alara's breath caught. The woman in the illustration could have been her reflection. "They were revered once," Lady Meredith continued, turning pages to show more images. Healers standing beside kings, healers mediating peace treaties, healers drawing poison from wounded land itself. They maintained balance. When alphas grew too bloodthirsty, too addicted to battle, healers could cleanse them. They prevented the cycles of endless war that plagued us before their time. What happened to them? Lady Meredith's expression darkened. What always happens to those who threaten power structures built on violence and fear? After the Great War 60 years ago, certain noble families, those who'd profited immensely from decades of conflict, began spreading rumors that healers had caused the war, that their magic was corrupting rather than cleansing. It was lies, of course, but effective lies. Healers were hunted. Most were killed. The few who survived went into hiding, and their bloodline was thought extinct. "Until now," Alara whispered. "Until now." The old woman's gaze was piercing. "Your golden eyes are the mark, child. And your gift awakens fully at age 20. When is your birthday?" 3 weeks. The autumn equinox. Lady Meredith sat back, something like satisfaction crossing her face. Perfect timing. The equinox amplifies magical gifts, especially those tied to healing and renewal. You'll come into your full power then. She paused, studying Alara carefully. "Tell me about your parents' death." The official story. A hunting accident 5 years ago. They were killed by a rogue bear in the northern woods. "And you believed this?" The question made Alara's stomach turn. "I was 14. My aunt said." She stopped, pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. "You think they were murdered?" "I think," Lady Meredith said carefully, "that a healer awakening to her full power at age 20 would have been noticed by her parents around age 15 or 16. They would have begun teaching you, preparing you for what was coming. And if the wrong people learned that the Thornwood bloodline had survived. The room seemed to tilt. Alara gripped the edge of the table, her mother's journal suddenly heavy in her pocket. My aunt. She knew. More than knew, I suspect. The timing is too convenient. Your parents dying just before you would have begun training, your aunt arriving to care for you and instead isolating you completely, preventing you from discovering your gift. Lady Meredith's voice was gentle despite the brutal truth she was delivering. And now you appear just as you're about to reach your awakening age, bonded to a cursed king who every healer in 5 territories failed to help. Your aunt must be terrified. Rage unlike anything Alara had ever felt burned through her chest. 5 years. 5 years of Katrine's sympathetic smiles and concerned whispers while she'd possibly arranged, the murder of Alara's parents. While she deliberately kept Alara ignorant of her own nature, stolen her inheritance, and positioned her own daughter to claim the power that should have been Alara's. Why? The word came out raw. Why would nobles fear healers so much they'd kill for it? Because war is profitable, Lady Meredith said bluntly. Weapons, territory disputes, the chaos that allows certain families to seize power and resources. Healers don't just cure bodies, they cure the spiritual corruption that makes alphas crave constant conquest. They make peace possible, even appealing. To those who've built empires on bloodshed, that's an existential threat. The education element was stark and clear. Systems built on exploitation will always suppress those who could expose or change them. Abusers, whether individuals or institutions, maintain power by keeping victims ignorant of their own strength. The door opened without warning, and Rowan entered, his expression immediately darkening when he saw Alara's face. What's happened? The truth, Alara said, her voice shaking with fury. About my parents. About what I am. About everything my aunt stole from me. She told him, the words spilling out in a torrent. Lady Meredith's revelations, the murdered bloodline, the conspiracy that had shaped her entire life. With each sentence, Rowan's expression grew more dangerous, the controlled predator she'd glimpsed at the ceremony rising to the surface. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he moved to her, taking both her hands in his. Listen to me carefully. Your aunt will answer for what she's done. I'm dispatching investigators to Thornwood tonight. They'll examine the circumstances of your parents' death, audit the estate finances, interview anyone who might have witnessed her crimes. She'll deny everything. She's spent 5 years building her credibility. Against her word, yes. But not against physical evidence, financial records, and the testimony of those she's hurt. His scarred hands tightened on hers. You're not a silenced girl in a tower anymore, Alara. You're under royal protection, and you have the full weight of my authority behind you. Your aunt's power was built on keeping you hidden and helpless. We're taking both those things away from her. Lady Meredith cleared her throat delicately. There's another matter. If word spreads that a Thornwood healer survived, and it will spread, after that display at the ceremony, the nobles who orchestrated the original purge may act again. The girl needs protection and training, urgently. She'll have both, Rowan said firmly. Meredith, I want you to begin teaching her immediately. Everything you know about the old healing ways, everything in your archives. We have 3 weeks until her awakening. I want her prepared. And what about the curse? Alara asked. If I can heal you fully, then you'll prove beyond doubt that the Thornwood gift is real and necessary, Lady Meredith interjected. Which makes you even more of a target, but also makes it much harder for anyone to move against you openly. A healer who saved the king becomes untouchable. The weight of it settled on Alara's shoulders, the responsibility, the danger, the realization that her life would never be simple again. But underneath the fear was something else, something bright and fierce and new. Purpose. After 5 years of being told she was worthless, she discovered she was exactly what the territories needed most. Rowan's hand found her face, tilting it up to meet his eyes. We'll face this together. Whatever comes, you won't be alone. I promise you that. Alara leaned into his touch, drawing strength from the contact. Then let's begin. I want to learn everything. And I want my aunt to face justice for what she's done. To me, to my parents, to everyone she's hurt. She will, Rowan said, and there was a promise of vengeance in his voice that should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like protection, like someone finally standing between her and the dark. The dream started 3 nights after Alara arrived at the palace. She would wake gasping, fragments of memory clinging like cobwebs, her mother's voice teaching her to sense injury in others, her father arguing with someone behind closed doors, and always, Katrine watching from the shadows with calculating eyes. In one dream, Alara was 9 years old, showing her mother how she'd helped a kitchen cat heal from a broken leg. Her mother's face had been radiant with pride and fear combined. "You must be careful, Starlight," she'd whispered. "There are those who would hurt you for this gift. Promise me you'll hide it until you're strong enough to protect yourself." Alara woke with tears on her face, finally understanding. Her mother had known the danger, had tried to protect her, and then she'd died before she could finish teaching Alara how to survive. Lady Meredith found her in the palace library that morning, surrounded by texts on healing magic, her mother's journal open beside her. "More dreams. Memories," Alara corrected, her voice hoarse. "Things I'd forgotten or been made to forget. My aunt, she was there the day my mother tried to teach me about my gift. I remember now. She was visiting, and she heard everything." The realization made her sick. She knew from the beginning what I was. Then she spent years ensuring you'd never discover it. Lady Meredith settled into a chair, her ancient eyes sympathetic. "Tell me what you're remembering." The memories came in fragments, but Lady Meredith helped her piece them together. Small cruelties that seemed insignificant alone but formed a devastating pattern when viewed as a whole. Katrine suggesting Alara's father stop wasting money on unnecessary education. Katrine's concerned observations that Alara seemed confused or not herself whenever the girl expressed confidence. The gradual cutting off of friendships, always framed as protection. Financial abuse often accompanies emotional manipulation, Lady Meredith explained. Control someone's resources, and you control their ability to escape. "Let me show you something." She produced documents that Rowan's investigators had uncovered, ledgers from the Thornwood estate spanning 5 years. Alara's hands shook as she read through them. Katrine had systematically drained her inheritance, selling off properties and pocketing funds meant for Alara's care, all while keeping her niece in a tower with barely enough to eat. 40,000 gold crowns, Alara whispered. She stole 40,000 gold crowns. And that's just what we can prove so far. Lady Meredith's voice was grim. There are also these. She laid out letters, correspondence between Katrine and several noble families, discussions of the healer problem, and agreements to ensure the bloodline stays suppressed. One letter made Alara's blood run cold. It was dated 6 months before her parents' death, and it referenced removing obstacles and substantial compensation for services rendered. "They paid her," Alara said flatly. "The nobles paid my aunt to kill my parents." Before Lady Meredith could respond, raised voices echoed from the corridor outside. Rowan's voice, sharp with authority, and another man's, dripping with disdain. Hardly appropriate for a king to bind himself to damaged goods. Everyone knows the girl is mentally unstable. Alara moved before she could think, yanking open the library door. Rowan stood in the corridor with a nobleman she didn't recognize, middle-aged, expensively dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Lord Grimward," Rowan said, his voice dangerously soft. "I don't recall inviting your opinion on my choice of mate." "Your Majesty must consider the political implications," Grimward pressed, not noticing or not caring about Rowan's warning tone. A healer queen would upset decades of carefully maintained territorial agreements. Some might see it as destabilizing. Some might see it as exactly what these territories need, Alara said, stepping into the corridor. Both men turned to her, Rowan's expression shifting to concern while Grimward's curled into poorly concealed contempt. Lady Alara, Grimward said, making her title sound like an insult. I was just explaining to His Majesty that certain bloodlines are better left in the past. Surely you understand, given your own family's difficulties. The implication was clear. You're too damaged, too tainted, too broken to stand beside a king. 6 weeks ago, Alara would have believed him, would have apologized and retreated. But 6 weeks ago, she hadn't known what she was capable of. My family's difficulties, she said quietly, stem from nobles like you murdering them to protect your profit margins from endless war. Grimward's face went white, then red. How dare you? I dare, because I have evidence. Alara held up one of Katrine's letters. Correspondence discussing payments for removing obstacles. Financial records showing embezzlement. Testimony from witnesses. Would you like to explain your signature on this letter, Lord Grimward? The silence was deafening. Grimward's hand moved toward the letter, then stopped, realizing the trap. Touching it would confirm recognition. Denying it would be a lie easily disproved. That's what I thought, Rowan said, his voice cold enough to freeze fire. You're dismissed from court, Grimward. Permanently. And you'll be hearing from my investigators shortly. After Grimward fled, Rowan turned to Alara with an expression that made her breath catch. You are, he said slowly, the strongest person I've ever known. I'm terrified, she admitted. Strength isn't the absence of fear. It's facing what terrifies you anyway. He took her hand, the contact now familiar and grounding.
Come.
I want to show you something. He led her to the palace infirmary, where 3 guards lay injured from a training accident. Lady Meredith had been preparing Alara for this, controlled practice with willing subjects. But standing before actual wounded men, seeing their pain, Alara's doubt surged back. What if I can't help them? What if I make it worse? Then we'll find another way, Rowan said simply. But I don't think you will. Trust yourself, Alara. Trust what you are. She approached the first guard, a young man with a badly gashed arm. When she placed her hands over the wound, the golden light came easier than before, more controlled. She could feel the injury now, sense where tissue needed knitting, where infection threatened. Her power flowed like water finding cracks, filling them, healing them. When she finished, the guard stared at his unmarked arm in wonder. The pain is gone. Completely gone. Alara moved to the next guard, then the third, her confidence growing with each successful healing. By the time she reached Rowan and placed her hands over his chest where the curse mark pulsed darkest, she felt certain rather than afraid. The golden light blazed between them, and she dove deep into the curse's structure, understanding it better now. It was like thorned vines wrapped around his heart, but her light was pruning shears, cutting away piece by piece. She couldn't remove it all yet, the roots went too deep, but she pushed it back further than before. When the light faded, Rowan caught her as she swayed.
Easy.
You've done enough for today. Not enough, she protested. The curse is still weaker than it's been in years. He lifted her chin, forcing her to see the truth in his eyes. You've given me more than hope, Alara. You've given me a future I'd stopped believing in. That's more than enough. That night, as Alara fell asleep in her luxurious chambers, so far from that tower room, so impossibly far from the girl she'd been, she dreamed again of her mother. But this time, instead of warnings, she heard pride. You're becoming who you were always meant to be, Starlight. Don't let anyone dim your light again. Alara woke with the words echoing in her heart, and for the first time in 5 years, she believed them. The palace archives smelled of old paper and forgotten time. Alara had come seeking more texts on healing magic, but Lady Meredith had given her a knowing look and directed her to a specific section: personal histories, family records, documents preserved by court scholars over centuries. Sometimes, the old woman had said cryptically, the most important knowledge isn't in textbooks. Alara found it tucked behind a false backing in a shelf marked with her family name, a leather journal, smaller than the one she'd discovered in her tower room, bound in faded blue silk that her fingers recognized before her mind did. Her mother's favorite color. The first page nearly broke her. For my daughter, when she's old enough to understand. If you're reading this, Elara, I am likely gone. I pray I'm wrong, that I'll be able to give you this myself and laugh about my paranoia. But in case my fears prove true, you need to know what you are and what that means. Alara's hands shook as she read her mother's elegant script detailing the history of the Thornwood Healers, the conspiracy that had hunted them, the nobles who profited from endless territorial conflicts and saw healers as existential threats to their power. Her mother had known she was in danger, had tried to prepare. Your father doesn't fully understand the extent of the threat. He thinks we can negotiate, reason with them, prove that healers are necessary for true peace. He doesn't understand that reason means nothing to those who've built empires on bloodshed. I've hidden evidence, financial records, correspondence, proof of the conspiracy. If something happens to us, it's in the East Tower, beneath the loose floorboard by the window. Use it wisely. Trust no one who benefits from your silence. The warning that followed made Alara's blood freeze. They will come for you when you approach your 20th year, when your gift awakens fully. Be wary of anyone who tries to keep you isolated, who tells you that you're sick or unstable. That's how they control healers, by making us doubt our own minds. Trust no one who kept you hidden, not even family, especially not family. The journal continued with technical details about healing magic, exercises for controlling her gift, warnings about the curse marks used during the border wars. Her mother had been trying to leave her everything she'd need to survive. Elara was so absorbed in reading that she didn't notice the sun setting until shadows crept across the pages. She should return to her chambers. Rowan would worry if she was late for dinner. But something kept her there, some instinct that whispered wait. The archives had a balcony overlooking one of the palace's inner courtyards, accessible through a door she'd noticed earlier. Elara moved to it now, stepping into the cool evening air just as movement below caught her eye. A figure in a dark cloak entered through what looked like a servant's entrance, moving with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where they were going. When they passed beneath a torch, the light caught blonde hair and sharp features Elara would recognize anywhere.
Katrine.
Her aunt was in the palace. 3 days before the bonding ceremony that would cement Alara's position as queen and make any move against her tantamount to treason. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Elara watched as her aunt was met by 3 men, nobles by their bearing and dress. They moved into a shadowed alcove, clearly not wanting to be seen, but Elara could hear fragments of their urgent conversation carried on the night air. Cannot allow this bonding to proceed. A healer queen changes everything. The girl is already demonstrating her gift. She healed the king's curse symptoms. Then we move now, before she awakens fully. The equinox is 3 days away. After that, she'll be too powerful. Katrine's voice cut through, sharp and familiar. I told you she was a threat. I told you 5 years ago that we should have eliminated her with her parents. But you wanted to wait, to be subtle. Look where that's gotten us. You were paid handsomely for your patience, one of the nobles said coldly. And for your continued services. Can you get close to her? I'm her aunt. She's soft-hearted and desperate for family connection. Yes, I can get close to her. A pause, then Katrine's voice dropped lower, more vicious. And when I'm done, everyone will believe she had one of her tragic episodes. Poor, unstable Elara, driven mad by the pressure of her new position. It will be very sad. The words hit Elara like physical blows. Her aunt was planning to kill her. Not in some abstract future, but now, in the next 3 days, before the bonding ceremony that would make her untouchable. She should run. Find Rowan, tell him everything, let him handle it with guards and arrests and royal authority. That was the safe choice, the sensible choice. But as Elara gripped the balcony railing, her mother's journal pressed against her side, she realized something. If she told Rowan, he would cancel the ceremony. Would lock down the palace and investigate, which could take weeks or months. And in that time, the conspiracy would adapt, find new ways to move against her, new vulnerabilities to exploit. These nobles feared her gift. Her aunt had spent 5 years trying to suppress it. The conspiracy had murdered her parents to prevent a healer from awakening. Maybe it was time to show them exactly what they should fear. The decision crystallized with startling clarity. She would not hide, would not wait passively for others to protect her. She would go to the ceremony in 3 days, awaken fully into her power as her mother had intended, and dare her enemies to move against her in the open where everyone could see. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal. But 5 years of safety through invisibility had cost Alara everything: her parents, her inheritance, her sense of self. She was done being a victim to be managed. She would be a healer, a queen, someone who stood in the light and dared the darkness to try her. Below, the conspirators dispersed, Katrine slipping back out the servants' entrance with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before. Alara watched her go, committing every detail to memory. "I know what you're planning," she whispered to the empty courtyard. "And I'm going to stop you." Later that night, Alara attended dinner with Rowan as if nothing had happened. She smiled and discussed preparations for the bonding ceremony, listened to his updates on the investigation into Thornwood Manor, and said nothing about the conspiracy unfolding in the palace shadows. Rowan knew her well enough by now to sense something was different. "You're quiet tonight. More dreams?" "Just thinking about the ceremony," she said, which wasn't entirely a lie. 3 more days. "Are you nervous?" His hand found hers across the table, warm and grounding. "Terrified," she admitted, "but also ready. I've spent 5 years being afraid. I think I'm done with that now." Something in her tone made him study her more carefully. "Alara, if something's wrong, nothing's wrong." She squeezed his hand, memorizing the feel of it. "I just want you to promise me something. No matter what happens in the next 3 days, we go through with the ceremony as planned. No delays, no changes. Promise me." His eyes narrowed with suspicion, but after a long moment he nodded. "I promise. But you're going to tell me what brought this on." "After the ceremony," she said. "When I've awakened fully into my gift, and we're bonded, then I'll tell you everything." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough truth to satisfy him. And when the danger came, because it would come, Alara was certain now, she would face it not as the helpless girl Katrine had tried to create, but as the healer she was always meant to be. Her mother's final words from the journal echoed in her mind. "You have more strength than you know, Starlight. When the time comes, don't hide your light. Let it burn so bright they have no choice but to see you." 3 days until the equinox. 3 days until her awakening. 3 days until Katrine made her move. Alara would be ready. The night before the equinox ceremony arrived heavy with anticipation. Alara's chambers had been filled all day with seamstresses making final adjustments to her ceremonial gown, advisors reviewing protocol, and well-wishers offering blessings. By the time evening fell, she was alone at last, grateful for the silence. She stood at her window, watching the moon rise, nearly full, almost ready. Tomorrow night, she would awaken fully into her gift. Tomorrow night, everything would change. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "My lady," a voice she didn't recognize, young and hesitant. "I've brought refreshments from His Majesty." Alara opened the door to find a servant she'd never seen before, carrying a tray with wine and small cakes. The girl kept her head down, showing only mousy brown hair and simple servant's dress. "The king thought you might want something to calm your nerves before tomorrow," the servant said quietly, setting the tray on the table. "He said to tell you, he'll see you in the morning." It was exactly the kind of thoughtful gesture Rowan would make. Alara's heart warmed as the servant poured wine into a crystal goblet. "Thank you." That was kind of him. The servant curtsied and left quickly, too quickly for Alara to notice anything amiss. She was too distracted by tomorrow's ceremony, too focused on the moment when her power would fully awaken. She lifted the goblet, swirled the dark red wine, and drank deeply. The taste was slightly off, bitter beneath the sweetness, but Alara attributed it to expensive vintage, something complex that her untrained palate couldn't appreciate. She drained half the glass before the first cramp hit. Pain bloomed in her stomach like a fist clenching. The goblet slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor as she doubled over. Fire spread through her veins, burning from the inside out, and she knew with sudden, terrible clarity, poison. The door opened again. The servant entered, but her posture had changed, confident now instead of meek. She reached up and pulled off the mousy brown wig, revealing blonde hair styled in an elegant twist. Katrine smiled down at Alera's crumpled form. Did you really think I'd let you reach your awakening? That I'd allow you to bond with the king and become untouchable? Alera tried to speak, but her throat was closing. She could feel the poison attacking her organs, shutting down her body system by system. She reached for her healing power, but the poison was designed specifically to suppress magic. She could feel her gift retreating, smothered. I paid a fortune for this particular toxin, Katrine said conversationally, crouching beside Alera with false concern on her face. Designed specifically to kill healers. It blocks your power while destroying you from within. Poetic, really. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper. I killed your parents with my own hands, you know. Your father first, quick knife to the throat while he slept. Then your mother, who fought like a cornered animal but couldn't heal herself fast enough once I severed her windpipe. Alera's vision was tunneling, darkness creeping in at the edges. But she forced herself to listen, to hold on to consciousness, to hear the truth finally spoken aloud. I've spent 5 years draining your inheritance, turning everyone against you, positioning myself for this moment, Katrine continued, her face twisted with satisfaction. And tomorrow, when they find you dead, it will be so tragic. Poor, unstable Alera, who couldn't handle the pressure of becoming queen. Everyone will believe it, because everyone always believed me. You were always too weak to matter. Something in those words, too weak, sparked fury through the fog of pain. Alera had heard variations of that her entire life from Katrine. Too weak, too fragile, too broken. And she'd believed it, internalized it, let it define her. But her mother's words from the journal burned brighter than the poison. Don't hide your light. No, Alera forced out through her constricted throat. The single word took everything she had. Katrine laughed.
No.
You're dying, you foolish girl. There's no. I am not weak. Alera's voice grew stronger, fueled by rage and refusal. I never was. The golden light erupted from her body, like a supernova. It wasn't the controlled, gentle glow she'd been practicing with Lady Meredith. This was raw power, survival instinct overriding the poison suppression, her body rejecting death with every fiber of her being. The light blazed so bright that Katrine stumbled backward, shielding her eyes, and Alera could feel it. The poison burning away under the onslaught of her gift, her organs healing faster than they could be damaged, her power awakening not gradually, but all at once in a desperate bid for survival. But the light did something else, something she hadn't expected. It carried memory, truth, the psychic imprint of everything Katrine had done. Golden waves pulsed outward from Alera's body, passing through walls and stone, touching everyone in the surrounding corridors with visions, Katrine murdering Alera's parents, stealing from the estate, conspiring with nobles, preparing the poison tonight. Alera heard shouting, the thunder of running feet. Guards burst through the door, weapons drawn, freezing at the sight before them. Alera kneeling in the center of a sphere of golden light, her eyes blazing like twin suns, while Katrine cowered against the wall, screaming denials that no one would believe because they'd all seen the truth. I didn't, she's lying, it's one of her episodes. Katrine's voice was shrill with panic, all her careful composure shattered. We saw, one of the guards said, his voice shaking. The light showed us everything. More people crowded the doorway, nobles, servants, advisors, all staring at Alera with expressions ranging from awe to fear. Lady Meredith pushed through, her ancient eyes wide. She's awakened early. The survival instinct triggered it. Then Rowan was there, shoving past everyone, his scarred face stark with terror that transformed to relief when he saw Alera alive. He dropped to his knees beside her, careful not to touch her while the power still blazed. Alera, can you hear me? She nodded, gradually pulling the light back under control. It retreated slowly, reluctantly, settling back into her skin like a tide receding. When it finally faded, she sagged forward, and Rowan caught her. "Poison," she managed. "Katrine poisoned me. I know. Everyone knows." His arms tightened around her. "The light showed us everything. Every crime, every lie, every cruel thing she's done." Alara looked past him to where guards were hauling Katrine to her feet, binding her hands. Her aunt's face was a mask of impotent fury, all pretense of caring finally stripped away. "You'll never be queen," Katrine spat. "The nobles will move against you. They'll kill you like they killed your parents." "The nobles she conspired with are being arrested as we speak," Rowan said coldly. "Your revelations were very thorough. We have names, evidence, everything we need." He stood, pulling Alara up with him, supporting her weight. "Take her to the dungeons. She'll face trial for murder, embezzlement, conspiracy, and attempted regicide." As the guards dragged Katrine away, her screams echoing down the corridors, Lady Meredith approached. "How do you feel, child?" Alara took inventory. Her body was healed, stronger even than before the poison. Her power hummed just beneath her skin, no longer dormant, but awake and ready. "Different," she said honestly. "Whole." "You awakened your full gift," Lady Meredith said with satisfaction. "A day early and under extreme circumstances, but completely. You're a true Thornwood healer now." Alara leaned into Rowan's solid warmth, letting him anchor her. 5 years of Katrine's abuse, culminating in this final, desperate attempt to silence her forever. But Alara had survived. More than survived, she'd transformed. "Tomorrow's ceremony," she said. "We're still doing it." Rowan's laugh was shaky with relief. "After tonight? After you literally brought yourself back from death and exposed a conspiracy in the process? Yes, we're absolutely still doing it. The territories need to see their healer queen. Their healer queen, not damaged goods. Not broken or unstable. A healer whose light was strong enough to survive poison, expose truth, and awaken into the full power of her bloodline." Katrine had called her weak. But surviving abuse, surviving Katrine, had required more strength than her aunt would ever understand. And Alara was done hiding it. The equinox dawn broke clear and golden over the palace, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. Alara stood at her window, watching the city wake, and felt the power humming beneath her skin in perfect harmony with the rising sun. Last night's awakening had changed her fundamentally. She could sense life now, the pulse of every living thing within range, and beneath it all, the corrupted darkness of Rowan's curse calling to her gift like a challenge. Before the public ceremony, there was private business to attend to. Rowan met her in his chambers, the early light catching the silver in his hair and emphasizing the dark veins still visible beneath his skin. They'd spread further overnight, the curse fighting back against the healing she'd done, knowing its time was running out. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. Lady Meredith said attempting a full purge might drain you completely. "I've spent 5 years being too afraid to use my power," Alara said, moving to stand before him. "I'm not afraid anymore." She placed her hands over his heart, and the golden light came instantly, stronger and more controlled than ever before. This time, she didn't just push the curse back. She dove into its structure, following every poison vine that wrapped around his spirit, his life force, the core of what made him himself. The curse resisted, fighting her with everything it had. Alara could feel its malevolence, the deliberate cruelty of whoever had crafted it. This wasn't just meant to kill, it was designed to corrupt, to turn Rowan into the kind of monster he'd spent his life fighting against. "I won't let you have him," she whispered to the dark magic. Her light intensified, no longer gentle but fierce, burning away the corruption with purifying fire. She felt Rowan's hands come up to cover hers, not restraining but supporting, lending her his strength even as she saved him. The curse screamed. She could actually hear it, a psychic wail of thwarted malice, as she severed its roots one by one and dragged it out of him entirely. When the last thread of darkness burned away, the golden light exploded between them, but this time it didn't dissipate. Instead, it wove itself into something new, a bridge connecting their spirits, their souls, creating a bond that went deeper than any traditional mating ceremony ever could. Alara gasped as she felt him, not just physically present but spiritually entwined, his emotions resonating with hers, his strength feeding into her gift as her healing fed into his power. This was what the ancient texts had described, what her mother had hinted at. When a healer bonded with their true mate, they didn't just join lives but became something greater together. When the light finally faded, Rowan pulled her into his arms, his face buried in her hair, and she could feel his relief, his gratitude, his love as clearly as her own heartbeat. "It's gone," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Completely gone. I can't feel it anywhere." "You're free," she confirmed, her own voice shaking. "The curse is destroyed." They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other while the enormity of it settled around them. 5 years of slow dying, ended in minutes by the power Katrine had tried so desperately to suppress. Hours later, the ceremonial grounds were packed with witnesses from all 5 territories. Alara wore a gown of gold and white that seemed to glow in the late afternoon sun, and beside her, Rowan stood in formal armor that no longer hid corrupted flesh but celebrated a warrior healed. The ceremony followed traditional protocols at first, the exchange of vows, the binding of hands, the formal recognition by the assembled nobles. But when it came time for Alara's first address as queen, she set aside the prepared speech and spoke from her heart. "Many of you know the official story," she began, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "That I appeared at a mating ceremony and was claimed by your king. But that's not the whole truth." She took a breath, feeling Rowan's support through their new bond. "The whole truth is that for 5 years, I was imprisoned by my aunt, told I was unstable and broken, isolated from everyone who might have helped me. She stole my inheritance, murdered my parents, and nearly succeeded in killing me too, all because she feared what I could become." The crowd stirred, uncomfortable but listening. "I'm telling you this because some of you might be living your own version of my tower," Alara continued. "Maybe it's a family member who controls your resources and tells you it's for your own good. Maybe it's someone who convinced everyone else that you're the problem while they're actually the abuser. Maybe you've started doubting your own mind because someone you trust keeps telling you that you're confused or unstable." She could see faces in the crowd responding to her words. Recognition, pain, hope. "If that's you, please hear me. You're not broken. You're not too weak to matter. The person telling you those things is lying to maintain control. And there's a way out, even when it doesn't feel possible." Alara's hand found Rowan's. "Seek help. Tell someone who's outside the situation. Trust yourself when something feels wrong, because it probably is. And know that surviving abuse doesn't make you damaged. It proves you're stronger than anyone trying to break you." The silence after she finished was profound. Then, scattered throughout the crowd, people began to weep, recognition, catharsis, the release of acknowledging pain that had been hidden too long. In the weeks that followed, Alara took back Thornwood Manor. Katrine was convicted of murder and conspiracy, her co-conspirators stripped of their titles and lands. The estate that had been Alara's prison was transformed into something new, a sanctuary for warriors carrying the spiritual corruption that came from too much violence, a place where they could heal both body and soul. On the day the sanctuary opened, Marcus brought his father, whose leg had never properly healed after Katrine's accident. Alara spent an hour working on the old injury, not just healing bone but removing the fear and pain that had calcified around the wound. "Thank you," Marcus's father said when he stood without limping for the first time in 5 years. "For not giving up. For becoming exactly who you were meant to be." "Thank you for raising a son brave enough to believe in me," Alara replied. That evening, she found Rowan in what had once been her tower room. They'd kept it deliberately, transforming it from prison to memorial, a reminder of where she'd started and how far she'd come. "Do you ever regret it?" Rowan asked, pulling her against his chest as they looked out the window she'd once pressed her forehead against in despair. The price you paid to become who you are? Alara considered the question seriously. I regret that it had to happen. I grieve for my parents and the years I lost. But I don't regret who I've become because of it. She turned in his arms to face him. Surviving Katrine taught me that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. That my light can't be dimmed by someone else's darkness. That's worth something. It's worth everything, Rowan said, and through their bond, she felt his absolute certainty. From the tower window, they could see the healing sanctuary filled with light and life, could hear voices raised in conversation and laughter instead of screams and manipulation. The East Tower would never hold another prisoner. Instead, it stood as testament to what survivors could build from the ruins of their trauma. Alara leaned into Rowan's warmth, feeling the pulse of life all around them. The territory's healing, warriors learning there was strength in acknowledging wounds, a culture slowly shifting from glorifying violence to honoring both courage and compassion. She wasn't naive enough to think the work was finished. Some wounds took time. Some healing happened in increments rather than miracles. But for the first time in 5 years, Alara believed in the future, not just hers, but everyone's who'd been taught they were too broken to matter. Some wounds take time, she said softly, echoing Lady Meredith's wisdom. Then it's fortunate, Rowan replied, pressing a kiss to her temple, that we have the rest of our lives. Below them, in the sanctuary that had once been her prison, a new patient arrived seeking help. Alara felt the call of her gift, the purpose she'd been born for, and smiled. The girl who had been hidden in darkness had become a queen of light, and she would spend the rest of her days making sure no one else had to fight their way out of the shadows alone.